I didn't notice the obvious for a long time. I didn't give any importance to the fact that my wife was staying late at work more and more often, that she had become more closed off, that jewelry and things started appearing at home that I clearly hadn't bought for her, and that her phone was almost always in her hands, screen down. I blamed everything on fatigue, stress, and the ordinary adult life in which everyone goes through difficult periods. I think I would have gone on living like that if one routine visit to the doctor hadn't destroyed everything I believed my family to be. A DNA test showed that our son was not mine, and at that moment every detail I had ignored for months came together into one frighteningly clear picture. Until that day, I sincerely believed our life was good. We lived in a quiet suburb, in a neighborhood where in the mornings you could hear neighbors turning on their lawn sprinklers, and in the evenings kids rode their bikes down the street without looking back. Our house was ordinary but cozy, a neat front, a small front yard, a backyard patio, and a garage that was my own little territory. That's where I fixed my son's bike, tinkered with tools, or sometimes just sat in the car after work, not rushing to go inside. I liked that feeling, as if I had a place where everything was stable and predictable. Our life was built on a familiar rhythm, and at the time I considered that a major advantage. There were no sharp turns in it. On Saturday mornings, we almost always went to the same little cafe not far from our house. We had been going there for so many years that the waitress knew our orders by heart and sometimes didn't even bring menus. My wife always ordered avocado toast. I got pancakes with bacon, and our son had chocolate mini pancakes. We sat at the same table by the window and talked about school, work, and weekend plans. Sometimes we argued about small things, sometimes we just laughed. It was a simple ritual, but it created a sense of family. On Wednesdays, we had family movie night. We ordered pizza or made popcorn, turned off the lights, and watched a film or a show. Our son went to bed later than usual, and that was our little agreement. I liked those evenings because there was no rush in them. It felt like at least once a week we were truly together, without phones or distractions. On Sundays, we went to Costco. A huge cart, long aisles, samples, constant conversations about what we really needed to buy and what could wait. My wife liked picking out things for the house, candles, towels, decor. I lingered in the tools and electronics section, convincing myself that I'd need all of it someday. After the store, we went back home and often grilled burgers in the yard. Our son ran around, and I stood at the grill thinking that this was exactly what a normal family life should look like. In the evenings, we walked around the neighborhood. Our son rode ahead on his bike, and my wife and I walked side by side. Sometimes we talked about work, sometimes about vacation plans, sometimes we just stayed silent. That silence didn't feel tense or awkward. It was calm, familiar. I felt that everything between us was clear even without words. I truly believed we had a strong family. Not perfect, but honest. I was sure I knew my wife, that we had no secrets, and that if something went wrong, we would talk about it. So when she started staying late at work, I didn't see a threat in it. When her temper grew sharper and she became more irritable, I thought she was just tired. When she spent more time on her phone, I blamed it on modern habits. I didn't ask unnecessary questions. I trusted her. And it was precisely that trust that made me the last person to realize that something had been wrong with our life for a long time. Looking back honestly, the first changes were so subtle that I didn't even perceive them as a problem. Nothing was sharp or obvious. No scandals, no loud arguments, no scenes. Everything seemed as if our life had simply shifted a little, the way it often does for adults who have lived together for a long time. She started staying late at work. At first rarely, once or twice a week. I didn't even ask why. She said there was a new project, that the management was pressuring her about deadlines, that we just needed to be patient for a bit. I nodded, said I understood, and went on with my own tasks. Sometimes I had dinner with our son alone. Sometimes I left food for her in the fridge. It all seemed normal. Then the late nights became more frequent. She might message that she would be home late when I was already putting our son to bed. Sometimes she came back exhausted. Sometimes, the opposite, unusually composed and calm, as if her day hadn't been as stressful as she described. I noticed this, but didn't attach any meaning to it. People deal with stress differently, I knew that. In parallel, small things started appearing, things I mentally filed away under the label not important. New jewelry. First a ring, then earrings, then a bracelet. I remember once asking where they came from. And she replied almost instantly, "A gift." From whom? She didn't specify, and I didn't ask further. I didn't want to look like a suspicious husband. I trusted her, and I believed that trust mattered more than questions. Her behavior at home changed too. Before, we could easily leave our phones on the table without thinking about it. Now her phone was almost always with her. Screen down, on silent mode. If a message came in, she glanced at it quickly and put the phone away. I noticed this from the corner of my eye, but each time told myself it was just a habit, that everyone does that. We talked less. Not because we were fighting. It was as if the need to share small details had simply evaporated. I talked about work, she nodded. She talked about her day, but without details. I thought we had just entered a calm phase of marriage, where you don't need to constantly prove something to each other. Sometimes I caught myself missing her even when we were in the same house. But I didn't see that as a warning sign. I thought it was normal after many years together. I was sure that if something serious was happening, I would sense it. There were moments when something inside me still twinged. For example, when she started coming home later, specifically on the days we used to spend time together. Or when I once offered to pick her up from work, and she refused a bit too quickly. Or when I noticed she began putting more effort into her appearance, specifically before her late work days. But each time I found an explanation. Always found one. I didn't want to dig deeper. Not because I was afraid of the truth, but because I was convinced that we were fine. We were a family. We had been together for so many years. We lived in a good house. Were raising a child. We had plans. Those things don't fall apart just because of a few late nights at work or some new jewelry. I thought I had control over the situation simply because nothing bad was happening. And that, I suppose, was my biggest mistake. Saturday mornings in our suburb always had a specific smell, a mix of freshly cut grass, gasoline from leaf blowers, and the faint aroma of coffee drifting from open windows. It was the smell of stability. I lay in bed listening to Sarah clattering dishes downstairs. Those sounds used to be a symphony of domestic comfort. Today they sounded like hammer strikes on the lid of the coffin where my trust now rested. "Get up, sleepyhead." Sarah peeked into the bedroom. She was already fully ready. Light makeup, a cashmere sweater, her hair in a flawless bun. "We'll be late, and someone will take our table." I forced myself to smile. It was a muscle I had been training for the past 48 hours, the muscle of pretending. We got into the car and smoothly rolled out of our quiet cul-de-sac. Our son in the back seat was eagerly talking about video games. I looked at him through the mirror. For 7 years I had searched for my own features in him, and I had found them. My brain had spent years self-deceiving, bending reality to match my wishes. Now that the DNA truth was out, I saw before me a completely foreign child. His brow line was different, his eyes shaped differently. And every time he called me Dad, the air in my lungs turned to lead. The diner greeted us with its usual hum. Betty, the waitress who had worked there for what felt like an eternity, was already standing by our table. "Hi, Stephen," she said, ruffling his hair. "Your usual? Chocolate mini pancakes?" We took our usual seats. I watched Sarah spread butter on her avocado toast. The same gold bracelet glinted on her wrist, the one I knew for certain I had not bought. "Mark, you're looking pale." Sarah placed her hand over mine. "Maybe you should take the day off? We could drive out to the lake." "You know, Sarah," I began, feeling my voice tremble. "I've been thinking about honesty. Remember how we promised we'd have no secrets? Not even small ones." She froze for just a moment with the knife in her hand. A split second, almost invisible, but to me it was louder than an explosion. "Where did that come from? Are you hiding something?" she asked, narrowing her eyes playfully, expertly shifting the focus away from herself. I looked out the window at the passing cars. Sometimes it feels like all this routine makes us lose something real. "Routine is life, Mark," she replied softly. "It's what gives us safety. We're happy, aren't we?" She said happy so effortlessly, as if it were an undeniable truth. I looked at her and understood. She had built a parallel universe where this lie was reality. How can someone wake up every morning next to a man, knowing she's raising a child that isn't his, and still casually ask him whether he wants coffee? I forced myself to eat a piece of pancake. It tasted like wet cardboard. After paying the bill, I left a generous tip. We stepped out into the bright sun. Neighbors greeted us, and we smiled back. "Let's stop by the garden center," she suggested. "I want to buy hydrangeas." "Of course," I said. "Let's decorate our perfect home." At that moment I realized my plan wouldn't be quick. I would let this stage set burn down to the very end. And the next place to gather evidence would be our Sunday trip to Costco. Sunday in our family always followed the same script. It was the day of large-scale shopping, the day of planning the week ahead. We went to Costco. For most American families, it's just a store, but for us it was a way to confirm our status. We are successful, we are stable, our pantry is full. Today, however, the huge concrete warehouse felt like purgatory. We pushed the giant metal cart through endless aisles. Sarah walked ahead, checking the list on her phone. She looked so domestic, so at home in this environment. "Mark, grab 2 packs of paper towels, they're on sale," she said without turning around. I obediently tossed the huge bundle into the cart. A thought kept hammering in my head. We're stocking up as if we have an eternity ahead of us. Why do we need so many paper towels if this family might stop existing in a week? We approached the sample stations. Our son ran toward a toothpick with cheese on it, and Sarah stopped at a display of scented candles. "Look, autumn comfort. Do you like it?" She brought the candle up to my face. I inhaled the overly sweet smell of cinnamon and apples. For a moment I wanted to snap. I wanted, right there among hundreds of people and screaming children, to ask, "Why are you buying candles for a home where you sleep with someone else?" But I stayed silent. Instead, I nodded. When we turned into the household supplies aisle, Sarah's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, and I noticed how her fingers tightened around the card handle for a split second. "It's from the office," she said quickly. "Probably server issues again. I'll step away for a minute, look for dishwasher pods." She disappeared behind stacks of gigantic detergent containers. I froze. My heart was pounding so loudly it felt like the entire department could hear it. I didn't go for the dishwasher pods. I followed her, keeping close to the mountains of boxes. I saw her in a dead-end aisle between the shelves. She stood with her back to me, the phone pressed to her ear. Her posture was tense, but her voice, I heard fragments of it, was quiet, almost tender. "Yes, I know. No, we're at the store. Stop. Wednesday, as usual. I'll think of something. Yes, me too." The world around me blurred. Wednesday, as usual. Wednesday, our family movie night. Our ritual of ordering pizza and watching films. Turns out she had her own ritual for that day. While I browsed Netflix for a comedy, she was planning how to slip out of the house. I quickly returned to the cart. When Sarah came back a couple of minutes later, her face was completely calm, only a slight flush on her cheeks betraying her nerves. "Work again," she sighed, tossing her phone into her bag screen down. "They say I'll have to stay later on Wednesday, so we might have to start movie night without me. Have dinner with our son yourselves, okay?" I looked at her. In that moment, for the first time, I felt not just pain, but a cold, calculated anger. "Of course, Sarah. We'll manage. Work is important." I picked up the pack of candles she had chosen. "You know, I changed my mind. Let's take 3, so our home is always bright and cozy." She smiled at me, her warmest, most genuine smile. We made our way to the checkout. We stood in the long line, discussed the monthly budget, joked with the cashier. Around us were dozens of similar couples. And for the first time in my life, I wondered, how many of these people, smiling and pushing full carts, are taking home the same pile of lies as I am? We stepped out into the parking lot. I loaded heavy bags into the trunk, and in my mind a plan for Wednesday was already forming. Now I had not only the DNA truth, but also time. Wednesday, as usual. It was an invitation to my own finale. Wednesday arrived with frightening inevitability. In our neighborhood, it was trash collection day. From early morning the trucks rumbled down the street, taking away everything unnecessary, used up, and broken. I stood by the window, watching the garbage truck leave, and thought that today I too had a major cleanup ahead of me. But I wouldn't be throwing away empty cereal boxes. I would be discarding the remnants of my faith in people. I spent the entire day in the garage. This place had always been my sanctuary, but now it had turned into a command center. I installed an app on my phone to track the family car. I used to think such things were signs of paranoia and disrespect, but now it felt like the only way to survive. While I tinkered with tools, pretending to fix the old bike, I felt like a spy behind enemy lines in my own home. Around 6 in the evening, Sarah stepped into the garage. She wore the same business suit she had left in that morning, but I noticed she had changed her lipstick to a brighter shade. "Mark, I'm heading out. Total chaos at the office, she said, quickly kissing me on the cheek. The smell of her perfume mixed with engine oil. I already ordered pizza. It'll be here in 15 minutes. Watch that robot cartoon with our son. Don't wait for me. I'll be late. I watched her car pull out of the cul-de-sac. As soon as the red taillights disappeared around the corner, I opened the tracking app. The car wasn't moving toward downtown, where her office was. She turned onto the highway and headed toward an old riverside motel, a place with a bad reputation among locals, but perfectly hidden from the eyes of respectable neighbors. I walked inside the house. My son was already sitting on the couch in the living room, surrounded by pillows. "Dad, is Mom coming back soon?" he asked without looking up from his tablet. I looked at him, at this boy who had no blood relation to me, yet who once seemed to look at me with my own eyes. "Mom will be late tonight, buddy. How about this? You eat your pizza and watch the cartoon, and I need to run to the store for a part for the faucet. I'll be back in an hour, okay?" I left him with the neighbor's teenage babysitter, whom I had called just 5 minutes earlier. As I pulled out of our street, Mr. Miller waved at me again while watering his perfect lawn. He smiled. Everyone smiled. The entire suburb was one big smiling mask. I parked 2 blocks away from the motel. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. I saw our car in the lot, parked right under the neon vacancy sign. I sat in the dark for about 20 minutes before the door of one of the first-floor rooms opened. A man stepped out first. Tall, fit, wearing an expensive coat. I had never seen him before, but from the way he carried himself, it was obvious. He was in control. And then Sarah came out. She was laughing. That same light, carefree laugh I hadn't heard from her in years. He straightened the collar of her coat, and she leaned into him for a moment. Something inside me burned out completely then. It wasn't a flash of rage. It was cold. An absolute cold so deep I could no longer feel my own breath. I raised my phone and took several photos, clear shots, illuminated by the neon light. I started the engine and slowly drove back home. Back to our house with the garage, to our Costco dinners, to our son, who wasn't mine. On Wednesday, as usual, our family movie night took place. Only the film in my head was far more terrifying than any thriller. Now I had everything. The DNA test results, receipts for the jewelry, the neighbor's observations, and these photographs. When Sarah returned home around midnight, I was sitting in the dark kitchen. "Oh, you're still up?" she gasped, turning on the light. "I'm exhausted. These reports will be the death of us." I looked at her, feeling the phone with the photos heavy in my pocket. "Yes, reports are serious," I said quietly. "But I think the most important report is the one we'll write together on Sunday, after our final grocery trip." Sunday arrived in ringing silence. I woke up earlier than everyone else and stared at the ceiling of our bedroom for a long time. Every crack in the plaster looked like a map of a ruined world. Today was supposed to be our final Sunday Costco run, a ritual that once marked the end of the week and now had to mark the end of my life here. We drove to the store in our usual formation. Sarah was cheerfully chattering about how we should buy extra meat for the grill since next week was July 4th, and we had promised to invite the neighbors. Our son played his handheld console in the back seat. Everything was so normal that for a second I wanted to lose my mind just to make that normality stop. Costco was crowded. We slowly pushed our huge cart through the swarm of people. "Mark, look at these steaks. So juicy." Sarah pointed at the meat section. "Should we take 3 packs?" "Take 4, I said, looking her directly in the eyes. "I think we'll need a lot of strength." When we got to the checkout and began unloading the mountain of groceries onto the conveyor belt, I felt a strange sense of relief. This was the end of supplying the fortress of lies. We returned home, and Sarah, as usual, began putting everything away. She hummed some tune while sliding the milk into the fridge. "Stephen, go play in the backyard," I said calmly to my son. "I need to talk to Mom." Something in my tone made Sarah freeze with a pack of cheese in her hands. She slowly turned to me. "What's wrong? You look like—" I didn't let her finish. I simply placed the printed DNA test on the kitchen island. On top of it, I laid the photos from the motel. And finally, I set down the spare car key with the second fob, the one that smelled of someone else's perfume. The silence that filled the kitchen became almost physical. It felt as if even the refrigerator had stopped humming. Sarah stared at the papers. Her face changed right before my eyes, from confusion to realization, and then to a frightening, stone-cold mask. She didn't cry. She didn't fall to her knees. She simply placed the cheese on the counter. "And how long have you known?" she asked quietly, her voice devoid of emotion. "A week for the DNA. Since last Wednesday for the motel. And as for living with a stranger, feels like my whole life." She gave a short laugh, bitter, angry. "You do realize, Mark, that here in this suburb, no one cares about the truth? No one cares whose child this is. People only want the lawn mowed and the smell of pizza on Wednesday nights. You're not destroying my life. You're destroying your image. That image is gone, Sarah. I've already filed for divorce. The house is on the market. I spoke to the agent yesterday." She finally looked up at me, and in her eyes I saw real fear. Not fear of losing me, but fear of losing the facade. This cul-de-sac, those Saturday breakfasts, that sense of safety bought at the price of my life. "And Stephen," she whispered, "you love him." "I do," I answered honestly, a lump rising in my throat. "And that's exactly why I'm not telling him the truth today. But I won't fund your performance anymore. Pack your things. The appraisers will be here tomorrow." I walked into the garage and started the car. I didn't know where I was going, but I needed to get out of this perfect dead end. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw Mr. Miller waving at me. He smiled his usual neighborly smile. I didn't wave back. I drove past identical houses with manicured lawns and wondered how many more DNA tests and secret photos were hidden behind those beautiful doors. The suburb remained silent. It knew how to keep secrets, but mine had just become its sentence. I pressed the gas pedal and, for the first time in 10 years, drove not by the GPS, but toward a place where there were no rituals, no Costco, and no lies with the taste of maple syrup.